Do you have autism? Know someone who does? Wondering how to grow through it and still thrive in life? All this and more in this episode right now.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, the Peter Mann story. This week, we're going to talk about Peter Mann growing up and not even knowing he was autistic, how he navigated through childhood, joined the service, started working in companies from the ground up to an executive level, and then how he became an entrepreneur. And through his child's illness, it was the catalyst for him inventing an indoor air quality system that you're going to love. So get your pens and paper out. Take this episode and forward it to your friends and family that have autism, you think may have autism, or have children of autism, because this will be a great encouragement, maybe even pick up some practical tips of how to deal and grow through it, and how it's not a curse, but a blessing. You just got to work with it. So at this time, we're going to begin the episode, but I did want to take 1 minute and just thank our sponsors. My Pillow has been amazing to work with. They offer American-made products. They offer quality products that I love. I've never slept better in my life. Sheets, pillows, mattress toppers, blankets, slippers, towels for the bathroom, kitchen towels for the kitchen, right? Kitchen for the kitchen, bathroom for the bathroom. Real novel idea, right? But seriously, folks, they have the best products I've ever used. They're already a great value. And with promo code REMARKABLE on their website, you get up to 80% off everything you order. And right now it's free shipping on orders of $75 or more. So check out mypillow.com/remarkable. Shop to your heart's content. Know you're supporting a great American organization. You're getting ridiculously amazing rates, and you're getting the best quality you'll probably ever use, or you can send it back for a full refund. That's My Pillow. The second sponsor we want to highlight is, drumroll, Console Vault. Console Vault is in-vehicle storage solutions, so you can basically take a safe with you everywhere you go. It installs into the center console of your existing truck or SUV or Jeep, and you are going to absolutely love it. It has proprietary technology for the locks. There's different options available. Ours has the spinning combination lock. They call it the Elite. So we can take our valuables, our wallet, watches, anything, even, you can put weapons in there. You go into the store, the bank, come back out, and it's completely safe. For someone to break in that bad boy, they literally have to steal the vehicle to get that open in time. So consolevault.com, check out their website, find your vehicle, the fit, the style, and with promo code REMARKABLE, you get up to 10% off everything you order. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being a loyal listener. I hope these episodes for the last 4 years and 200 plus episodes have encouraged you, inspired you, and helped you change your life for the better, because that's what this show is about, glorifying God and helping you grow. And that's how we glorify God. If I can do a better job, let me know. Reach out to me through the website. But if not, get ready for a remarkable episode with our friend, Peter Mann. Hey, Peter, how are you today, brother?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing remarkable. Today is an amazing day, and I'm glad to have you here. Our listeners are too. We just told them a little bit about you and what to expect in this episode. But right out of the horse's mouth, if they listen to your entire episode, time's the most valuable commodity we have. By the end of this show, what's one thing you guarantee our listeners all around the world that they're going to be able to get and apply to their lives?
Yeah, I would say, awareness is really important. I think, being able to be aware and have empathy and seeing things from the other person's perspective. I think in general, there's just too much arguing and squabbling and going on right now in the world, and and we're just screaming past each other or at each other, and I think it's just it's critical to really understand each other and don't assume the worst in people, and, look for common ground. That's, what I would say in general.
And I think that's great advice, especially within most countries, but in America right now, very
Yeah.
tumultuous times. You got Israel, very tumultuous times, and we don't want to be so open-minded our brains fall out, but we don't want to be intolerant and just bash on people because they have a different opinion, right?
Yeah, we all gotta, at the end of the day, we're all here together, so everybody needs like his best you can get along. And, I think we're all better together than we are, fighting each other. It's just not productive, and it's drama, and, there's too much, good going on. And I think there's just, there's a lot more good than bad, and we tend to focus on the bad and forget the good and have gratitude. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree, my friend. I agree. And so obviously you were raised a certain way, like we all were. Good, bad, ugly, pretty, pretty ugly. Everything that happens to us grooms us into the men and women we are today. So for you get to the point where you're like, the whole episode's going to have gold in it, but empathy and to understand, to form common ground. Something in your life brought you to this place. So let's start with your story. Where were you born? What was your upbringing like? Was it like this or was it polar opposite? What was your beginnings like, Peter?
Yeah, I grew up in Syracuse, New York, and my dad was a manager at General Electric, which was a pretty huge company in Syracuse. And my mom stayed at home because I have, there's 5 kids, so it's a pretty large family. And so I kind of grew up around the world of GE and Syracuse University in terms of sports and the things that they had going on, as well as GE in terms of all the business things they had and the technology. And they used to make color TVs just 2 miles down the road from where we lived. And and it's just been kind of interesting to kind of watch all these jobs just leave, and just kind of see what it was to see what it is now. It's a bit of a different world. And growing up there, it was, it was, I felt kind of fortunate because I was really exposed to really, world-class company, and then as well as the university and all that had to offer in terms of like education and kind of balancing. That was those two things. That was kind of my world growing up.
And you said you 5 kids in your family. Were you the oldest, the youngest,
I'm
the
number
middle?
4. Yeah.
All right. What was that like? Were you always fighting to get place at the table to get heard, or was it pretty balanced? What was
No,
that?
we were all pretty introverted. And so, my sister's 10 years older, so she was like a second mom to me kind of growing up. So that's maybe not a normal, maybe with the 10-year age gap, that's normal, but I mean, it's all I knew, so it seemed normal to me at the time. But, I don't know how many kids nowadays would want to be a second mom when you're when you're 10 or 11.
Yeah. So your parents had 3 children, then a 10-year gap, then you and one more?
Well, no, they had 3 children and then like a 6-year gap, and then me, and then my younger brother's like a little over a year younger.
Okay.
So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. And then again, we don't want to spend or dig up things that aren't there. Just your childhood pretty good. Anything that happened that you feel like really molded you to who you are today, you just want to keep going through middle school, high school,
Yeah, I
college.
mean, it was pretty rough. I wasn't, ready for school. I didn't talk really until 3rd grade. I've found out like more recently that I'm autistic, and that explains like everything that I went through being different.
Hmm.
And so, now it was kind of an advantage because I had to deal with adversity and being different and not understanding why. And, at that time they weren't diagnosing folks that were not high needs, or, like, like it is now. And, it was elementary school was really a challenge for me to get through. I don't, most people like have fond memories of elementary school. was It was pretty much a nightmare for me. I was just, getting to 6th grade was when things started to change for me. But, it was pretty rough just being a different kid.
Yeah, and back then, everything we did, if it didn't fit in the norm, it was considered weak or what's wrong with you. It wasn't even the teachers; they weren't kind and understanding, right?
Oh no, they weren't kind. It was kind of verbally abusive. And so it's, yeah, so it kind of, I guess I got tougher going through that process, but I don't think, well, maybe they still do that now, but I think there's a lot more awareness around that, around differences and, kind of how people are wired. But that really, it kind of started my interest in human behavior because I knew I was different, but I was so fascinated at how different other people were. And I was just trying to understand, and I would watch and I would just kind of see how people would do social interactions. And it's like, that doesn't come natural to me. Or,
Yeah.
all that. So it's, kind of a bit of a person from a different planet is kind of what that was like for me. And so, but in my entrepreneurial career, it's been really helpful because things are tough and competitive and you have to have resilience. And I kind of grew a lot through that experience in my younger years.
Yeah, and God talks about that, how all things work together for good to them that love God, to those
Yeah,
are called according to his purpose. So even the
yeah,
worst things in our lives somehow will ultimately end up turning good. But it's not fun going through the and being picked on and feeling
yeah,
different and, alone. And I don't
yeah.
want to put words in your mouth, but that's how you felt at times, right? Like, I'm different.
Yeah, I knew I was different, and I was, I didn't really pay attention to kids. To me, my biggest struggle was like teachers that were kind of not very kind. And it's like you go to school and you're a little kid and you think the teacher's there to protect you, and it's like not necessarily the case, at least, from my experience. And they didn't know anything. Nobody was trained. Nobody, like, you just didn't know a lot. Like
Mm.
back then, they just thought I was being difficult or smart, like asking me a question. And I'm like, I don't know the answer to that. And it's like, how do you not know the answer? And just like going off on me. And it's like, yeah, it's yeah, it's amazing how like certain events leave marks, or you just remember, you go immediately back to that moment. And then I'm like, I am not treating anybody like that. That is so inappropriate to, treat someone like that. You need to control yourself and, respect other people. It's, I think it's kind of like how I'm wired naturally anyways, but just kind of like living it, it's like I'm committed. I will never do that. It's just not right. And it's like, what do you get out of that anyways?
Yeah, and that's just it. When people face that kind of adversity and pain, they either tend to roll it down the hill to somebody else or they go the
Yeah,
polar opposite. And that's
yeah.
thankfully what you did. You're like, I don't want to be picked on or embarrass people or hurt people. So you develop that empathy. Now, you mentioned
Yeah.
in sixth grade things started changing. How so?
Yeah, so in elementary school, from my perspective, it was just chaos because there's no schedule, there's just all these kids, and there's no structure to it. When you get to sixth grade, like you have a schedule, you have like class, like you have a routine that gets settled, and that's for an autistic person, that's huge because you have expectations and you know what your day is going to be like, and you can mentally prepare yourself for everything. Elementary school, it's like it's there's none of that. And so, and plus I was getting a little bit more mature, like from a math standpoint, I was at least 2 years ahead of where I was verbally, and they started to catch up verbally. I was just way behind, with where that was kind of added to the struggles being so
Yeah.
far behind. But that's pretty typical with autistic. Like if you have a kid now that kind of has that profile, they're going to get screened and they're going to have support and all of that for kids now. It just didn't happen in 70s and 80s.
Yes. Now, your brothers and sisters, you said you were all quiet and introverted. Did they have the same struggle or were they quiet but
Yeah,
not
they were
autistic?
quiet, but not so bad. My dad, now I look back, I'm sure he was autistic because he basically was the same way in school. And it's like, you don't hear many people say that. Like, I didn't make a sound in kindergarten. And really didn't talk until third grade. And my dad was the same way. And and now we're finding out it's like 90+% genetic. And so while my siblings aren't autistic, they do have some traits that are similar. So we're all pretty like quiet, introverted, except when we're all together, and then it's weird because we're all become like loud and
Yeah.
comfortable with each other. But when like we're out in the world, it's like quiet.
Yeah, no, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
So now you get into middle school, starts being more structure. Take us between middle school and college, like anywhere you want to stop that's significant. So
Yeah, I
you're,
mean, I did really well. I got into, so the other thing that helped me is I got into cross country and track and, in sixth grade and I was running and it's pretty common for autistic person to get into like solo, like distance events, like running or swimming, or, I'd shoot hoops by myself. And I did really well in all of that. And so that really helped my self-esteem. And, I kind of, it was funny. I kind of started at the bottom and worked my way up to all the advanced and towards the top through high school. And then I got a NROTC, Navy ROTC scholarship. And so I went to University of Rochester on an ROTC scholarship, completed, that in 4 years. And then, then I was in the Navy for 4 years. And that was, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it was a free ride to a really good school. And, it just seemed like a really positive thing to do. And so I have, I'm glad I did it with the Navy, but I just did my 4 years and got out. I was naive. I didn't realize that like we could go to war because we had like in my life growing up, it was like after Vietnam, but there hadn't really been anything. And it's like when the first Gulf War started, we're like, oh, you guys are going over to the Red Sea for, for the war. And it's like, I feel so dumb not even realizing that you go through all the training, all these exercises, and you're like, oh no, this is real now. It's just
yeah,
life got like real quick. And so, that was some stuff to process to do that, but did really well with that. And I'm kind of, had really good experiences and the guys on the ship are great.
yeah, you
Um,
can't get more structure than the U.S. Navy, right? Or except a Marine, maybe.
Yeah, the Marines are a little more hardcore. We did have some Navy SEALs from time to time on the ship, and those guys were pretty tough, I would
But did
say.
you appreciate that structure and that they told you what to do, when to do it, how
Yeah,
to
the
do it?
structure was good. It's kind of a bit much in some ways because like they have all these like everything is documented. Like there's all these rules. You have volumes and volumes of books, and I'm like, that seems a bit excessive, but the structure was good. I knew I'd go to college, I have a guaranteed job. So it kind of eliminated any ambiguity for me, and I get to travel the world and, I wasn't planning on being in the Red Sea for any period of time. That wasn't in my scope of possibilities, but it is what it is. And it was really good experience to deal, under pressure and, and just kind of persevere through that.
Awesome. So then what was your role in the military? Do you mind me asking?
Sure. I was communications officer, which is the one in charge of all the communication systems, all the crypto codes. So I had a top secret security clearance and, we changed the codes out every day. So I was responsible for that. And that's kind of a tough job because you're expected to do it perfectly. And if you mess up, you're really in trouble because you have top secret codes that you have to protect. It's one of those jobs where it's like there's no upside, but a whole lot of downside if you don't do it right. And so, that was something really had to pay attention to. And then after that, I was a gunnery officer, and that was my job when got sent over to the Red Sea. So I was in charge of, many of the weapon systems on the ship. And, that was, kind of a cool job. Being in the room with all the computer screens and all the radars and all of that kind of stuff. And, talking to the guys controlling the weapon systems and the captain and And I did really well there because I was super calm. Like you don't want anybody freaking like my boss was the ops officer and he kind of he would get spun up sometimes and get really emotional. And I'm just like calm, right? that's, that's that's where being autistic like comes in handy because like I didn't get rattled. It's just like just talking calmly through a couple like pretty intense, situations where you didn't know like what was happening, or like we had some like fighter jets coming at us that we didn't know who they were, and it's like, holy cow. Do we shoot them down? We don't know, they're not communicating with us, so they don't seem like they're friendly, and you have to make some like real split second decisions, that are you don't expect as a young, 20 something year old to have to make.
Hmm. And when you were in these situations, again, how God built you, autism or not, like you said, you stayed and remained calm. On
Yeah.
the inside, like you did mention, like, oh, what do we do? It was kind of like, oh, okay, this is higher alert, but like it doesn't raise your heart rate, or I mean, you could still 2 + 2 is 4. Is that how your mind worked?
Yeah.
Just factual?
Yeah. It was completely logical and calm. And, because for me, it's like there's no point in getting worked up. Like that's going to make things worse. And so I was really dialed in to just being focused and, looking at what's going on and, kind of more
Yeah.
of a mathematical mindset than, my boss. I could see my boss who would just be emotional and they're like, you need to leave the room because you're not helping. And that made me even calmer just because I'm like, I need to be calm. I can't freak out.
Yeah. And there are people like that. It's like when everything hits the fan, 9 out of 10 people panic. And there's
Yeah.
always that one person who gets calmer and more focused. And those are the people we need in
You
emergencies.
want
So
that. Yeah. You don't want that person. Like if I'm freaking out, then you need to start worrying because like things aren't good.
yeah, yeah. All right. So where does your life go from there, Peter? You're in the military.
Yeah. It was interesting. I got out. This was in the like early to mid 90s. And it was interesting. It was before 9/11. So getting out of the military was like, well, you don't have relevant experience. It wasn't the thing it is now. It really changed after 9/11. But prior to that, it was almost a liability to have the military experience. And I had trouble articulating like how it was relevant to working at a company. So I did get a job, but it was really low wage. It was like $20,000 a year.
Even in the
Like,
90s, that was tough.
that was low. Like I was making at least 50, 60, 70% more than that. And you didn't have all the taxes. And, it was like, at least I took like close to a 50% pay cut just to get a job, to get experience. Cause, but then I was fortunate to, after about a year and a half, I got a job at a company called Tech Data. It's in Florida, Clearwater. And, they kind of grew from the Fortune 500 to Fortune 100. And I started at the bottom and just kind of worked my way up to a director level, which,
Nice.
which is pretty solid. And then from there, I got recruited to Dell and I was the senior manager. I managed developing functionality for Dell.com. And then I was in marketing and managed pricing strategy and rolling out a bunch of products and got a really good experience in terms of marketing and operations.
What years were you with Dell?
Early 2000s, I kind of left. There was the dot-com bubble burst,
Hmm.
which was pretty rough because we were laying off people every couple of weeks, it felt like, and the morale was just really low. It was kind of, I went there like coming out of the 90s, the computer industry was on fire. And then you hit the dot-com bubble burst and it's like it goes the other way. And so it was pretty rough. I wasn't worried about my job, but just laying off people on a regular basis was just kind of, it was not my thing.
Yeah. And I think at that point, Gateway got tanked when Ted Waite left, and then he came back. So Dell and Gateway were back and forth at that time,
Yeah.
right? Early
Yeah.
2000s.
And it was HP and Compaq. There was like a handful of guys
Yeah. There's a,
that
but it
were
was
kind of
very competitive.
super competitive. Yeah. very cutthroat. And, but the good thing is the dot-com bubble burst kind of pushed me to go and, get into business myself. And I co-founded an e-commerce business with another guy in Austin, and built that up over 7 years and sold that. And then in 2009, I started Oransi, which is the current company, to based upon really influence my son had as an infant. He struggled with asthma, and it was, it was pretty tough with all the steroids and medications he had to get, and kind of his quality of life through that, and not being able to breathe. And you just a couple of times he's just changing colors if you're holding him, and it's like, there's nothing I can do. And so I really got interested in air quality, and what can I do to help him and people like him that doesn't involve just administering a bunch of medicines and things that are going to freak him out. Because I saw what it did to him when when he was taking the steroids. And so, yeah, so that was kind of the foundation, and I just kind of built the company up really over the last 15 years.
And then in between, we kind of skipped a major step. Where did you meet your wife to have a child?
Oh, yeah. I met her in college.
Okay.
I was off work focused, but yeah. Yeah, we met in college, and it was, in the Navy, the cultures, I guess you kind of align with the culture that you're in. And so, everyone has, not everyone, but in general, people have kids, very young. And so, the two boys were born. The first one was born when I was in the Navy. I was probably like 25 or 26, and the other one was a couple years later. But yeah, pretty young to have two kids.
Yeah. And you're in the military, you're traveling, and then you
Yeah.
get out, and now you're trying to, start your career. And like you said, you had to work from the ground up, then you go to Dell.
Yeah, you have a kid and you're making 20,000 a year, and it's like that's the whole family income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we weren't getting, and we shouldn't have, but we weren't getting bailouts either. So you had to work your ass off and figure it out.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of it, but those are good skills to have, especially if you get into entrepreneurship. You got to figure everything out. Nobody's there really to help you. I mean, there's services and stuff, but it's really on the individual to kind of sink or swim in a sense.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
So you're now married, you got two kids, you're working, you're growing your career, and then your first son or second son gets the asthma.
It's the second one. I mean, they're actually older now. They're closer to 30 years old now. Like I'm old.
No.
So yeah, I mean, he kind of outgrew it, I would say, as he was entering high school. You kind of, I guess when you get it really young like that, it's not uncommon to essentially outgrow it, but it was pretty rough, his younger years, having to deal with that.
But so this was the catalyst for your,
yeah, that was the inspiration. Yeah. That's kind of that always stuck with me, because it really left an impression that this is a problem. When you experience like a medical issue that in a child, it's your child. I mean, unless you're a sociopath or something, I don't know. It doesn't affect you. And so I'm like, let's see what we can do. Like, make a business out of this and try and help people.
Yeah. And so how did it come about? Did you design it? Did you put it out to market? How did you actually create your brand?
I started, I'm just a guy that has marketing experience and operations experience. I'm not a manufacturer. And so originally I had some relationships with some factories in China and worked with them to develop some products. And then as it evolved, started to make product through a contract manufacturer in Connecticut, worked with designers in the US, designed all new systems from scratch. So it was kind of like a step-by-step building block over some years. It wasn't like, I didn't have like a ton of cash to to do all that. So I kind of had to start small and build up from there. And now it's I've never could have imagined what it is now. We merged with a motor company here in Virginia, and so we have a pretty large factory. We're designing and manufacturing our own products. We just started that last month, and
congrats.
really reshored manufacturing. Yeah. So that was kind of something that I'd always wanted to do because growing up in Syracuse with all the manufacturing and, maybe it's nostalgia. I don't know what it is, but it's, we kind of figured out how to make our products here comparably priced and maybe a little better performance than the Chinese. And, not many people can say that, but, it was not an overnight thing. It was probably 10 years in the making to be able to do that.
Yeah, and they say the average quote unquote overnight success is about 9 years these days. So you're
Yeah.
you're right on point, man.
Yeah, definitely wasn't overnight. It's baby steps.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question because this show is all about our humanity, and we have listeners from around the world. I consistently over 100 countries tune in. We have all sorts of cultures. There's one race, the human race, but there's different cultures, different countries. When you have autism as a child, that gets a lot of focus, but autistic children turn into autistic adults. How is that now leading a family? You had a wife, you have two boys. What did you experience and what did you learn that we can help other people with? Whether you learn the easy way or the hard way, let's help as many
Yeah,
people as we
so I
can.
wasn't diagnosed until a couple of years ago. So I kind of went through most of my life not knowing I was autistic. And for me, it kind of showed up in some misunderstandings or I mean it's like people don't act that way. Like, why are you are you playing games with me? It's like, no, I'm not like I didn't. There's times where it's how do I say it? There's times that or there's social cues that typical people pick up that autistic people just miss. And there's situations where there's a certain expectation that you'll act a certain way, and for me, sometimes I just wouldn't have anything to say because I'm still processing what's going on. And then it's like, well, why can't you talk? And so it's a lot better now that I understand what it is and kind of comfortable in situations or so it's also about expectations in certain situations. And so, I'm really glad that I got diagnosed and understand what it is. But previous to that, there occasionally would be situations where it was difficult, like social awkwardness, or, you go to a party and like, I have no thoughts in my head of what to even say to this person. Like, and someone's trying to have a conversation with you and you're like, what is wrong with him? It's like, this person is not normal. And I'm like, no, that's correct.
Yeah.
I
So
don't know what to say.
what are some tips or tools or techniques you're using now to help with it that maybe a listener can share with themselves or their family members or friends that are struggling?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, um, it's all about the awareness. And, for me, like I have to be my best self to be able to, it takes a lot of energy to do something like that. And so I have to, really take care of myself. I have to get proper sleep. I have to eat well. I have to exercise. I have to be like on my game because there is an immense amount of mental processing that takes place in social conversations that is natural and happens in the background for most people. That for an autistic person, you are thinking through every single thing that's going on. You're taking in all the things that are going on around you in the environment, all of the noises, like everything's an input. We don't have the filters that a typical person has. And so it's kind of mentally exhausting. And so for me, I have to be in the right environment. It can't be like a super loud restaurant is too much. It's just like it's like if you turn the volume twice as loud is what it's like for me. And it's like I can't hear anything that's going on. And so it's having awareness to what it takes to be like your best self, like physically and mentally, but also be in the right environment. And if folks understand like you're that way, in some ways they give you a pass or they have understanding or they have empathy that, what comes naturally for some people is not natural. It's you're thinking through everything, like calculating everything or processing everything. And over time, it just becomes exhausting. And so when folks understand that and understand that sometimes you need a little longer to answer a question, they have grace and kindness. And that goes a long ways, I think, at working, with anyone who, is a bit different. If you give people the benefit of the doubt, I think is always helpful. And don't assume the worst in people, and, and try and see things from their perspective, because, just because someone's different doesn't mean, you don't assume the worst. You don't know what somebody's going through. You don't know, not everyone's wired the same, I guess is my point.
Yeah, so people aren't wired the same, and
Yeah.
people, like you said, you want to have that kind of grace and understanding towards people.
Yeah.
When you're in this situation, like especially whether it's at home or business, let's just pick at business first.
Yep.
Do you share with people like, hold on a second, I just need a little more time? Like, how do you communicate
Yeah.
to say I need more time? Because some people haven't figured it out and they're struggling
They
and
don't
it's
know that.
hurting.
And you get judged. And yeah, now I say, like, people around me know it. And sometimes they're like, oh, why don't you just take some time and think about that? Like, I don't even have to say it half the time. Like, if it's people that know me well, I mean, certain things I can immediately respond to, but if it's something I've never thought of before, it may take me like hours or minutes or day to like come up with, because I'm wanting to get the best answer possible. And it's not something that, just, you know, I arrive at that quickly. And so, I often say, well, let me get back to you on that. It's kind of learning for me little tips and tricks to kind of, not make the other person feel bad, but still kind of like move the ball forward, I guess, in a conversation.
Yeah, and that's what we're here. That's what I was saying. For
Yeah.
people who are struggling with autism, what tips and tricks do you have for them so they can benefit their life? So you're saying, just say, hey, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. That's
Yeah.
just something.
And give yourself, like, don't be hard on yourself. Like, there's enough like hard things going on. Like, give yourself a pass. And, everyone's trying their best. And, and if you need time, just say, hey, let me get back to you tomorrow on that. Let me think it through. I don't feel the need, like, I struggle with eye contact to a certain extent. It's something, as a child, it was like constantly berated for. But, for me, when I explain, if I look at someone in the eye, like, my brain kind of shuts down. I'm not processing properly. So it's like, do you want me to listen and answer your question, or do you want me to make eye contact and not have the ability to process what you're saying and get, like, those are my choices. So
Yeah.
it's like, give me a pass on the eye contact thing.
Let me ask
Um,
you a question. School, we're going to go back because this is something I'm very actually interested in this topic. So I'm glad we're having this interview today. When you were in school, they used to talk, put stuff on the board, tell you to take notes.
yep.
Did you struggle with that? Because I remember being in
Yeah.
school, I'm like, I can listen and retain. I can take notes and read it later, but why am I bothering coming to school? I can just read anybody else's notes. But I couldn't do both at once, and I never understood how people did that. Did you
Mhm.
struggle with that too?
I struggle with all the verbal stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't read very well. Like, we'd have to, like, read out loud. That was a nightmare for me, because I don't know what it is with tracking, and then the word turning, like, letters into words, like, in your brain. It was a bit of a train wreck. I hated it every time I had to do that. Plus, you have all the attention on you in the room.
Hmm.
It's, I don't know if they still do that. Maybe they do, but for me, it was. I mean, I could do it now, but back then, it was rough. But yeah, like, I'm more of a visual learner. I'm not a, like, auditory, kind of a thing.
Do you
Uh,
remember anything you did? Because obviously you did all right in school, you got into a good college, you got
mhm.
great, even though it's hard to get that first job, you got a
Yeah.
great career with Dell and on, and you became
Mhm.
entrepreneur, started your own
Right.
company. A lot of times when you talk to people with these kind of just challenges in life, they go right into entrepreneurship so they can do their own
Yeah.
thing and bypass all the hassle. You
Mhm.
kind of went through it. So what did you do to bridge the system to go from where you were to functioning within the system with all the red tape they have?
Yeah. I mean, so I started in business, like, I don't know, 92, 93. And, I think with the internet, it's a lot easier to be an entrepreneur now than it was. You didn't really have the internet back then. And so I think there's just so many more opportunities that just like back then, it seemed like you just worked for the man. You worked for the company. Like that's kind of, at least that seemed to be how it was for most people. And so I didn't really see entrepreneurship as an option. And I didn't have confidence in myself that I would be able to be successful with it because like I have no experience with it. Like this is like complete unknown. And so for me, working at those companies was like my on-the-job MBA is how I approached it. And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur because I wanted the autonomy, and that's probably partly from being autistic. Like you really want autonomy. I mean, I could do a lot of things and do it really well, but I kind of struggle in some of the larger companies where there's the political stuff that goes on because I don't I just get the job done and just that's it. And 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 when you see people getting promoted past you that, I'm trying to be objective, but it's like I don't understand how that guy is promoted beyond me. But I knew it was from the social side is where my challenges were. Um, and so, I kind of used it as, I'm growing and learning, and I just used it as an opportunity to gain experience. Like everything was about learning and experience, and then maybe I can use this down the road and leverage it that way instead of, because I didn't think I don't know what I would have done from an entrepreneurial standpoint starting out of the Navy.
Yeah, that would have been hard. Very, very
Yeah,
hard. Okay.
yeah,
So now what about in the personal life? I mean, it's hard to communicate human to human. And then
yeah,
men are men and women are women, and we're equal, but we're different. And
yeah.
that right there, men usually gravitate towards facts, women gravitate more towards feelings. Now you're a man that actually has less feeling because how God wired you. So how did you overcome that in your marriage? I'm sure there were some fun moments.
Yeah, I mean, I would say even though autistic people are perceived as not having feelings, it's for myself, and I would say most autistic folks I've talked to, you actually have very strong emotions. It just doesn't come across. Like I could be feeling something hugely intensely, and my face is the same. Like it doesn't, it's like I don't know, flat face, or it's like it's just calm. So it's calm here, but I could be just like going nuts on the inside.
So you
If
have this. I thought you said earlier that you didn't pick up on verbal cues and emotion. That's why I brought that question up.
Oh yeah,
But hold on the other side, inside you're
I
saying
feel emotion.
to others, I'm seeing a stoic face, but on the inside you're having the same anxiety or the same rage or the
Yep.
same love. It's just
Yep.
not showing here.
Yeah, in fact, you have almost higher levels of feeling and higher levels of empathy. You just can't look at someone who's autistic, or that's the general, but generally, and tell what's going on inside them. It's like you just like I would often have some people say, I don't want to play poker with you because it's like because I don't give off anything, whether it's good, bad, whatever's going on. Like you just can't read it. And it's this may sound funny, but if we go out to a restaurant, like I sometimes have to like remind myself to smile because because that's what the other, that's kind of what you're supposed to do. And it's like I kind of feel that, but it's like it's a lot of things are like mental exercises that you have to remember to do, sometimes in the moment that a lot of people it's just they just kind of wear their, I don't know, emotions like on their sleeve or on their face. Like you can just it's all transparent. And yeah, and for me and a lot of other autistic folks, it just doesn't work that way.
Got you. And now what about with a marriage? I mean, communication is so hard as it is with someone you live with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week,
Yeah.
365 days a year for years. How has it positively or negatively affected your marriage? And more importantly, what tips, if you learned the hard way after all these years,
Yeah.
what tips do you have for other married people with autism?
It's, there would be times like she would pour her heart out and I would be like, I don't know even what to say. Like and that doesn't go over very well. You know, Like, and it's a misunderstanding. Now that we know I'm autistic, it's like that doesn't happen because, or at least it's significantly less than what it was before, because she's like, what is wrong with you? Like, I respond. And if I'm not, if I'm like tired or I'm sick and I'm just, I'm kind of operating at 50%, I have like no words, and like I don't even know what to say. I just like all I do is like hug. And it's not what's expected. It's a lot of it's around expectations. And if you're acting in a way that's different, it's like, what is wrong with you? And so now that we know, I haven't really, in the last 2 years, maybe once, but really haven't been having those challenges. It's really just the awareness. And really, for me, I put work in every day to make sure I'm my best self and I'm not like worn down and get into a situation where I just can't function like 100%. Because I have to remind myself, you need to be present. You need to be present. Like someone's talking, like really need to listen, process, and then be a human being. And it's gotten dramatically better since the diagnosis. And I would say there's a lot of folks, in the 70s, it was 1 in 2,500 were diagnosed as being autistic. Now it's 1 in 40, 1 in 50. And it's not that there's more autistic kids now than before, it's just you weren't diagnosed. Like the psychology or the assessments and awareness of the brain and all that has, like, it was in the dark ages in the 70s and 80s. I mean, it's crazy. It's not that long ago. And it's like, like what were they doing? This is like a whole new thing, apparently, to understand it. And, so what I'm saying is there's a lot of adults who are autistic like me and don't know it. And often they get diagnosed when their kids get diagnosed. And they're like, your kid's autistic. And then they're like, you need to get screened as well. Because you're just like your kid. And so there's starting to be more adults figuring it out, but there's still a huge, I mean, if you go from 1 in 2,500 to 1 in 50, it's like, that's a lot of people.
Oh, yes, 100%. Yeah, and you got to wonder too, because I remember growing up and, you look around the classroom, an average kid when I grew up, there's like 35 kids in each class.
Yeah.
And, there's maybe one or two that I look back and say they were autistic. But now, like you're saying, it's like a larger percentage.
Yeah.
So I definitely believe, what do they call it? The spectrum, like the level,
Yeah.
right? I believe definitely they're better diagnosing people on the spectrum.
Mhm.
But I do think there's some other, I mean, and you tell me what you think, but I think there's something else affecting us where more people have more severe versions of it. Because looking at, our generation, I think we're about the same age, but looking at our generation, more of our children as a whole, like society wise, seem to have more severe issues. So I tend to believe, well, what caused that? Is it the vaccines? Is it the food supply? Is it, I don't know. I feel like there's more than just awareness. What are your thoughts on that, Peter, is having it?
So the diagnostics have changed dramatically over the years. Like, I don't know, they call this thing DSM, the diagnostic something. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what it stands for, but it has all kinds of conditions in it. And if you go back 40 years or whatever, like it was a thinner book. And
Yeah.
so, I think when you went through the early 2000s, at least with autism, there were a lot of people that were blaming vaccines because it's like, well, we were doing all these vaccines and these kids are being diagnosed with autism. And so it's like, they're kind of doing some kind of correlation, but it's, they've pretty well showed that's not the case. Autism runs in families, and I can look at my family and my nieces and nephews, and it's pretty prevalent. Like in our group, not everything's genetic. There's still some that are environmental, or there's other
Hmm.
conditions that maybe is along the lines of what you were referring to. But with autism now, where they're thinking is it's highly genetic, and I can just see people in my family, and it's like it's obvious, right?
Yeah, and I don't doubt that at
Yeah,
all. Because I guess what I'm getting at is this: me and you are looking back to our second grade classroom.
yeah.
How many kids in second grade were like you in your memory?
I don't know.
Maybe just you, or maybe one other,
Maybe
right?
just me. Yeah,
Okay, that's what I'm saying. That's the baseline. That's what I
yeah,
remember too. 35 kids in my class. There's one or two that I look back and say,
yeah.
okay,
That's kind of the math. Yep.
okay, okay. So we agree on that. But this is what I'm saying. Now you go into a second grade classroom, there's like 10 kids. So
Yeah, I
that's,
don't know about that.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's just so many more children
Hmm.
struggling with this that it's the genetics isn't the only. I agree for sure. There's
Yeah,
learned
I'm just
behavior.
talking
There's,
autism. Yeah,
yeah, I'm sure there's all sorts of reasons, but I just feel as though from observation,
yeah,
there's more children with it than there was in our generation. And so that does raise the question, why? But that's not your expertise, and we're not going to harp on that in the episode. But I
yeah,
did want your thought as a man who struggled, who grew through it.
yeah. I
So,
mean, I've researched it. Like when you're autistic, you have very few interests, but you go really deep into certain
mhm.
things. And when I found out I was autistic, I went pretty deep into into understanding what it was and following all the experts in the field and like people that have been doing this for 50 years and really listening to everything they say and then look for differing opinions. And like I don't want to, have confirmation bias and just go down a rabbit hole that you
Yeah,
know,
no.
but it's I think a lot of it is I think the largest factor of the numbers going up with just specifically autism is because they changed the criteria. Like
For
if you
it.
change the criteria for what qualifies as it, you're going to get all more people because it's a much broader net. Like back in the 70s and 80s, like you had to be very high needs. Like, you, you know,
Well,
we
diabetes, high blood pressure. They keep changing the metric. So, oh yeah,
yeah.
you drop it 20 points. Of course, more
Yeah.
people have high blood pressure.
Right.
And
You
that's
change the score or the scoring method, like you're going to get more people that hit this. You're lowering the bar in a sense or expanding what it is, and you're going to get more people just because it's not the way you did it before. It keeps evolving as to how they used to have Asperger's as separate from autism, and then they grouped them together
hmm
as
yeah.
one spectrum. So, I mean, I would have been Asperger's, but I'm not. I was diagnosed when Asperger's was kind of killed off as a separate thing and grouped in with the mix.
So now today, Peter, we is it between your birth and today, is there anything we missed that you want to discuss, or do you want to transition to where's Peter today? Where are you heading next? And how can we as a remarkable community help you get there?
I think that's the highlights. I mean, really excited about what we're doing now with our manufacturing. We merged with a company that invented a new electric motor technology, which really gives us a platform to make all kinds of new products, which I'm really excited about. And it's kind of interesting in a way that I come more from the marketing and which is like when you were talking about men and women and like marketing is about emotions and feelings. And so like that's actually my experience in that side. And now I'm working with a lot of engineers who are more of kind of the world I used to come from, which was all numbers and process and no emotion. It's kind of melding these two worlds together and trying, it's almost somewhat like not counseling, but it's like you're taking two worlds and trying to get each to see the other's perspective and what each other brings to the table. And it kind of as marriage is kind of like that. And so that's kind of what I'm doing now. And, I think that's kind of where the empathy comes from, where you need empathy on both sides.
Yeah. And do you have employees directly under you, or how's your structured?
Yeah. I mean, I'm the CEO, but I'm kind of only CEO because I founded it. Like I would never, I know like I would never in a normal company be able to work my way up. I just wouldn't happen. Like I know some other autistic people that are CEOs and they 100% started their own business. That's how that's how you get that role. But yeah, we have, I mean, 30 some odd people. It's not a huge team, but we're going to be adding probably 100 or so in the next 18 months as we ramp up manufacturing. So,
Yeah. And no, what I was asking is like, Because some people like would be self-aware, like I have a hard time communicating and feeling empathy, so I'm going to put a layer between me and the staff. So they put a management role. So do you
Yep.
directly manage or do you
I
focus?
work with the managers,
Good.
uh, the chief marketing officer. I work with, head of our customer service. I work with our salesperson, kind of the heads of those organizations, those teams, I
And
guess.
are
But
there
I still
any,
like interact with the individual team members, because I want to, be involved and make sure they're okay.
yeah, that's great leadership. Now, are there any are there any techniques you've learned to help you communicate with your staff better?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a, there's, I don't know if this is communication, but it's having clarity on like where you're going and being able to communicate that. There's a difference between management and leadership, and there's a lot of folks tend to go into management, which is very top down, very, I don't know if authoritarian is the right word, but like very much, non-collaborative. And then there's like leadership, which is really like valuing people and understanding people and working with them so they can be their best selves. And in that, that's kind of, I think where a lot better results come from. And for me, it's trying to stay out of what they're doing, which is kind of hard sometimes, but yet telling them more about like where we're going and being as clear as and crisp as I can on that. So they see how their role fits into that and how they're contributing to that and how they're a valuable team member and what they're doing is, kind of worthwhile. And that really helps them as individuals, like, be part of a team and, because we can't do anything without the folks on our team. Like you know, like none of us are as good as all of us together, and we all got to be pulling in the same direction. And so it's, to me, it's more around just kind of seeing where we are and seeing where we're going and being able to, communicate this is the path to how to get there. And if it, is it believable and is it achievable and is it, and is it like a stretch because you don't want it to be easy. So that's kind of what I focus on, but I try and communicate that, but also listen and really understand what challenges that the folks are having. Because if they're struggling, it doesn't really matter what I say. And so I kind of, in some ways, it's more of the feeling sensitive side, which actually comes through, which is kind of hilarious given like where I came from.
Yeah. Now, tell us a little bit about your products.
Yeah, so right now we're making air purifiers, so HEPA, which were really popular during COVID because they're able to clean viruses out of the air. And then carbon ones, which is new, which I'm really excited about because they remove all the gases and VOCs. So anyone that does any kind of painting or all kind of smoking or their neighbor smokes to remove that, that's really effective. But the key to all of that is the motor that we're making. And so right now we're making the air purifiers, making the motors, and then we're going to be branching out over later this year, next year, into some other product categories, just as more of a kind of not Dyson but Dyson type products.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, continue the conversation, check out your products, we're going to put links in the show notes, but what's the best
Okay.
way people can reach you personally if they want to ask a
Yeah.
question or connect?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so it's Peter Mann, Mann, and our website is oransi.com, ORANSI.
What's that name mean? How'd you come up with that?
So it's a Finnish word that means orange. And so my grandmother, who was pretty influential in my life, I didn't talk about her. She grew up in Finland and came here to the US when she was 15. And, she was a nurse, very kind, but also funny, which is probably not typical for to be funny and kind, but that's kind of her mix. And she was influential in my life. And orange is, Syracuse orange. And so I kind of grew up around everything orange. And so I was looking for a name that was unique at the time. And I just put that in the Google Translate. I put orange and then I did it in Finnish and that's what came up. And I'm like, all right, it's available. I can
That's awesome.
trademark it and nobody has anything remotely similar, but yeah. And it also means orange is rejuvenation, which is kind of also, I kind of like that word. And especially to help like my son and people with asthma, to feel rejuvenated, be able to breathe properly. It's kind of a fundamental human function is breathing. So yeah. And so to me, it all kind of fit together.
Yeah, I remember growing up as a kid and my close family friend, we called each other cousins, but we were just close family friends.
Yeah.
And one of the children had extreme asthma, like you're saying, turn
Yeah.
blue, be rushed to the
Yeah.
hospital.
Yeah.
It was terrible. And
Yeah.
I remember watching a couple of the episodes and being like terrified. You can't do anything. So
No. Yeah.
it's nice that you focused on that and help clean the air so there's at least less attacks or maybe even, remove
Yeah.
the triggers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the big thing. Exactly. It is the triggers. And if you can minimize that, it's kind of like having allergies. If you can minimize the allergens in the air, you're just not going to feel it like, like you would otherwise.
Yeah. And it makes anybody with allergies is tracking with you. If you don't have
Yeah.
allergies, it's
You
just,
don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, be thankful. But
Yeah.
yeah. So, okay. Well, Peter, it's been a pleasure having you on the Remarkable People podcast today. Is there anything else that we missed that you'd like to discuss or any final thoughts for our global community?
Yeah. No, thanks. I appreciate you having me on. I would say, when in doubt, just be kind. Kindness goes a long ways, and you never know what the other person's going through. So I would, just default to being kind and assume that, the best in the other person.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good, my friend. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Like Peter said, be kind. God says love him first and love each other second. And really, when we follow those two commandments, everything else falls into place. So, Peter, thank you for being on the show today, my friend.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, like our slogan says, don't just listen to this great advice Peter shared with you, do it. Repeat the good each day so you can have a great life in this world, but more importantly, in eternity to come. So I'm David Pasqualone. This is our remarkable guest, Peter Mann. And ladies and gentlemen, share this, comment on social media about it, give it to people you know it's going to help, encourage them, and we'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.